Hey, good afternoon, world. It's Patrick Lovell coming to you on the afternoon of Friday, July 22nd, 2022. Kind of like that date, 22/22. And good, happy Friday afternoon to you all. I am dropping this truth bomb with a little bit of a smile on my face, considering kind of an absurd space that I occupy, but it's funny, and unfortunately, it's an inside joke at the moment, but hopefully, I'll get to it fast enough. But if I can try to inspire you, please go to YouTube. Check out Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con. All you have to do is like and subscribe. We got to break through the freaking algorithms, and we got to get to 1,000 subscribers. And I've got to start to elevate the conversation that I'm bringing to the world, and I have been to over 5 million views on TikTok. So I'm assuming that if we can get, I don't even know what the math of that is, about 0.001% of the amount of people that have seen these videos on TikTok, could please go to Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con on YouTube and give it a thumbs up and a subscribe. That would be extremely helpful. In fact, I'll see it all weekend, so do it now. Don't hesitate. Come back to this before you do anything. That would be freaking awesome. But the truth bomb that I have to try to bring to you full scope and as quickly in a manner as I possibly can is just the mind-blowing scenario of all of the things that are on display that are relevant to the con at www.thecon.tv that I've been trying to get your attention to understand. That is the largest revelation of the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history that created the world we live in, that nobody understands, that everybody's asking for, and actually walking around the circumference of what it is that this is all about. Like I've said before, I'm Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I'm hanging out with Sala, and we discovered the Ark of the Covenant, and everybody's digging in the wrong place. That's the story. I'm going to start with what is probably the most widespread story at the moment, and I think the easiest way to get to what it is that I'm going to try to reveal to you. Former President Donald Trump, of course, ongoing January 6th investigation, January 6th hearings, and everything that's come out, and a lot that hasn't come out, quite frankly. But kind of culminating into the situation, the story that, it's pretty crystal clear that the at least the way the media is interpreting what the investigations are revealing is to defraud the United States through basically the smoke and mirror tactics of lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate, of basically trying to steal the election when, of course, he's projecting that it was stolen from him. Now, there's a lot of things that you guys can read about or you already have and you're probably already aware of, so I don't need to try to reinvent the wheel of what exactly the insurrection hearings have exposed, so much as try to draw you a picture of what they haven't exposed. And really, I think the most important part of it, as it relates to, again, what it is that I'm trying to bring to your attention, that is the true master scenario that basically leads to everything that's in the mix. Okay? So the January 6th investigations have basically cornered Trump as the mastermind of the whole thing. To me, it's almost laughable for anybody who's paying attention to Donald Trump and his fried chicken, burger eating, all-star wrestling persona, apprentice, for the last, 15, 20 years, right? If there's anything I think we're all aware of is Donald Trump is no mastermind. So what does that mean? Well, you've got to, in a criminal investigation, be able to pull together elements, especially if you're talking about a criminal conspiracy of intent for a specific aim. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of shocking evidence of Trump's stupidity and his buffoonish behavior, but I'm not quite sure yet that it's proved that he had actually took it upon himself to engineer and architect this sort of all the moving parts necessary to achieve what it is that he is being, investigated for, right? Again, to defraud the United States of America. So I find it interesting because to defraud the United States of America is exactly what our financial system did in ways that are exponentially huger, if that's even a word. You can't even compare the level of involvement of what our financial system did that we expose in the con at www.con.tv that none of the majors Netflix or HBO or anybody else has shown you, because they get paid by the same villains that we expose, that have the complete control of the United States, and not necessarily, bad actors like Donald Trump, even though he's guilty of everything they said he is, but being the mastermind, not so much. And so, I'm yelling at the screen as I'm watching all of these investigations take place. I'm like, okay, great, that's amazing. I can't believe that he did that, but I do, or that happened under these circumstances and everything else, not to mention throwing food against the wall. I remember I called Donald Trump Chump stain, and he literally left a stain on the wall of the White House walls, and how freaking ridiculous is that? But Trump would have had to literally compartmentalize, and had almost with military precision the ability to have the reach out to the contacts of all these white supremacist groups and these militias and these neo-Nazi groups, of which many of them have, former military personnel, maybe police officers from across the country, and to bring them all on their own dime, to encourage them on their own dime, where maybe he sent a whistle, call out to everybody, like the bat signal in reverse, the choker signal, and all of these white supremacists showed up on the day at his hotel, where we all saw coming, days in advance, by the way. I'll never forget all of the stuff that was happening online, and they all partied down at Trump's hotel before they went and freaking attacked the Capitol, and so, first of all, everybody saw it coming, unlike what, mainstream media says, but second of all, to be able to do that and have the resource and the coordination and everything else, it seems like it had to have military precision. Yeah, I wonder who actually would have that sort of that sort of experience in a major way to be able to pull something off like that. Does the name Eric Prince ring a bell? And I'm probably going to get in a lot of trouble or become a marked man by mentioning this, but fuck it, Eric Prince is the mastermind, quite frankly, behind this incredible paramilitary group of mercenaries, guns for hire, of some of the top, probably, assassins that are the West has been, and I say the West because it's also the United States and Great Britain that are involved with Blackwater. But after 9/11, these guys were guns for hire that went to Iraq and did a lot of dirty business all over the war, and probably in ways that our military couldn't do, that probably happened behind cameras and everything else to avoid all of the mishaps of Vietnam. If you want to talk about media's reaction to how the Vietnam War played out. But in Iraq, these guys would go and they'd be paramilitary forces, and they'd, do whatever they had to do. And I'm sure they were involved with all sorts of questionable individuals and money laundering and this and that to be able to create the outcome that they needed to create. Okay, this under the purview of, quite frankly, the White House. They worked with the CIA, and then ultimately they ended up working with big money actors from UAE, and also, I wouldn't be surprised, Saudi Arabia and others. But I mean, that's Eric Prince's come from, and they were unmarked paramilitary guys that wound up in the Black Lives Matter group, with these vans, throwing protesters in the vans. I think they killed a couple of guys, or maybe one individual in Portland that I'm aware of, but they showed up without freaking any sort of designation of who they were, and they were actually acting as the police in Portland during Black Lives Matter. I don't know if they were in other locations as well. I just remember specifically that. So my first question would be, okay, where does Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon, of course, just got indicted or arrested today, or will be arrested because of his non-compliance with the subpoena with the January 6th investigations, which I think he was supposed to respond to as long as, last September. But, he didn't. He tried to kick the ball down the road. So they got serious, and, now they're taking him down. And he's going to go to jail unless he plays his cards whatever way he's going to play his cards. Maybe it's worth it for him to go down and be quiet. But we know that Bannon was the intersection, and I apologize for the background noise, but there's nothing I can do about it. And I've got to get this recorded. Otherwise, I'm not going to, because I've got other things I got to do. But the long and the short of it is that you've got Eric Prince, you've got Steve Bannon, definitely hive mentality, very experienced, very sophisticated. And then they had connections to none other than what? The really big money. Now, let's not be naive. I mean, Eric Prince comes from one of the richest families in the country, the DeVos family, right? His sister was director of education, secretary of education under Trump, and everything that constitutes. But they're worth billions. They were into pyramid schemes and all that kind of stuff. But the long and the short of it is that Eric Prince has plenty of his own money, but the guy's a gun for hire, and so he would easily know how to work with the likes of Koch organizations, Charles and David Koch, and everything that they've done in the conservative sort of elixir over the course of the last 4 decades, to create outcomes that they want. Particularly, we know that they were involved with influencing Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, his wife Jenny Thomas, and also to try to get the Supreme Court to rule that, there was a causality for actually questioning the elections, the Biden election and so forth, the big lie, right? So that was part of it as well. And so then you got the Mercers. The Mercers were involved with Cambridge Analytica, and that's an extremely sophisticated situation. And then there's Peter Thiel, the billionaire. Where is he from? New Zealand, Australia, whatever, but he's a guy that's involved with all this, sort of, high level technology and ways it kind of played out. And if you really follow the thread long enough and go back deep enough, you find that all of these guys were also involved with, UAE, like I said at the top, and other, scenarios around the globe. Not to mention, I hate to even bring it up, but I mean, there was involvement with Russia's intelligence agencies as well. And, God, who else was involved? I actually remember reading about, of all people, Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, so, why would a bunch of billionaires want to work with, a paramilitary force to somehow turn on the switch for a bunch of white supremacists to create a coup d'etat? Why would they want to do that with Donald Trump at the helm? Do I even have to proffer an answer? I mean, it's pretty obvious. I can't even stop thinking about who I think really Donald Trump is in this whole mix and how perfect he is. You couldn't, script this better, but it just seems like such an intelligence operation, to create the status quo so that billionaires can contain their geopolitical control of the United States, the Senate, the judiciary, and everything else. And why? Because ultimately, like I keep telling you in this analogy of Game of Thrones, if you get the White House, you get Congress, you get the Iron fucking Bank, which is what? The Federal Reserve. Why does that matter? Because if you got the Federal Reserve and you can, use it for yourself, hey, you know what? You use the full faith and the credit for the United States to make yourself ungodly fucking rich and to own the world. And I think that's what's really been going on for a long time. And I think, quite frankly, all of the stuff that I just mentioned to you is really just the white part of the equation of the white nationalists and everything that those guys might constitute is wanting to get a piece because they saw the whole thing play out with what took place during the 2008 great financial crisis. And it's not funny. It's absolutely horrendous because we got none other than Barack Obama, a change we could believe in, that ultimately became the ultimate chameleon. And he hid all of the stuff that I'm trying to tell you so that Wall Street could get away with what I'm telling you. They walked to $29 trillion in 2009, and they've got another $30 trillion since, maybe more, okay? So that's the big story. But here's the other thing as it relates to Donald Trump and ultimately how all roads lead back to the con. I shit you fucking not. And nobody's talking about this, not Rachel Maddow, not, Anderson Cooper, not Tucker Carlson, not anybody in the independent media, but I'm going to tell you, there is a direct correlation between the con, where we unearthed all of the different manufactured liar's loans used on deceptive acts and practices, where a lot of brokers would just basically white out and fill in blanks to get loans approved all day, every day. And that led to, I think, 80% of the loans between the vintage time period that we call 2004 to 2006 that ultimately blew up the world because we had derivatives trades, secondary market, all sorts of stuff that took place there, where we took whatever the total value of the housing market was at the time, I'll call it, let's say $1.4 to $4 trillion, and then they amplified it in all the derivatives. That became $600 trillion in notional value on these trades from derivatives and CDOs and all of the supposedly, sophisticated financial products, which were all bets on bets on bets of just bullshit. And then the whole thing collapsed. And then what happened? The Federal Reserve came in and made it all whole. Well, they basically buried tens of millions of Americans. And the courts used all of the same documentation fraud that was used in the run-up. The brokers and the servicers and all of the people in the apparatuses within the food chain did the exact same thing on the way down when they stole houses in courts that weren't stopping this because the judges were paid to bulldoze foreclosures without looking at discovery, without getting the evidence that we have produced. And I've got 70,000 pieces of documentation fraud, just in my efforts alone, in our efforts alone, much of which is on the shelf. But we lay out the whole thing in the first part of the con, and then there's more. But the bottom line is, where do you think Mr. Donald Trump, what is he, Hamburglar? Whatever caricature that he suffices. I mean, he's a fucking cartoon, man. And he's like, what is he, the Joker and the Joker signal? I mean, it's like, you can't make this stuff up because, they use documentation fabrication for the election certification fraud. As far as I'm concerned, I really believe this with everything that I am after everything that I've seen. And I don't know why nobody's not actually questioning this, is that Donald just saw that Wall Street got away with all this stuff, and he decided to get a piece using the same tactics. And it all unveiled itself within the big lie. And I would not be surprised if Donald Trump or Steve Bannon or any of his henchmen actually watched the fucking con and were like, I got an idea. This is madness, because this is what I've been projecting now. We released the con 2 years ago. We did kind of a soft launch. We had over 1 million people, catch the first part. We tried to make a deal. We tried to wind up on Netflix as a result of this, because this is how it's done today. You got to check out all the algorithms, because technology leads how all of these acquisition guys buy. But then we found out we got blocked at Netflix. We got blocked at HBO. And who are they doing the deals with? It turns out that BlackRock is in control of Netflix, or at least the largest shareholder. And then, of course, if you go to the merger and acquisition between Discovery and Time Warner, none other than Goldman Sachs and Chase, two of the monsters that we reveal in the con, are the guys that put the deal together. Okay, everybody, like I continue to tell you, in business, especially at the highest levels with the CEOs and their stock buybacks and their modern executive compensation and their perverse incentives, they make money. Ultimately, you borrow with zero interest against this, and don't even get me started on the tax code for the billionaires above the line. But in the end, they're backstopped by the Federal fucking Reserve. That's what we've done for 13 years. That's what quantitative easing was backstopping this criminal apparatus with the full faith and credit in the United States. And because somebody like Trump, who's a full-on mob guy, ultimately was like, hey, wait a second, what are these guys doing? What are they getting away with? Oh, they took out Madoff. Yeah, but you know what? He's a small-time player because he stole from a bunch of rich guys, and that's the only reason he went down. Look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a presidential run. I'm going to tell all of the American people what they want to hear, that I've got a plan to make America great again. But at the same time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lie, steal, and deceit my way to getting everything I can, a piece of this stuff, while stepping on everybody. Then everybody's going to believe me, and I'm never going to get busted. I mean, this is like every movie we've seen, from DC Comics going back 50 fucking years. But it's even worse than that. And, I'm not smiling, I'm not laughing, because it's just absurd. But I mean, literally millions of people had their lives railroaded. Millions of people lost their houses to foreclosure. They wound up in divorce. Some committed suicide, lost their jobs. They never got orientation again. Maybe they built back their lives. Maybe they got back in the racket number 2, which is basically the same story. And so, for example, right before I had record on this, I was looking around at some of the headlines, and and this was the point, and I'm so glad I thought about this before I sign off here, is that all of this stuff is going on, right? And so you've heard me, bring to your attention that none other than Mr. Don't Look Up, David Sirota, the guy who is like, we can't handle big problems, in that movie that was nominated for an Academy Award, has ignored me, revealing to him that we have thousands of pieces of evidence of documentation fraud using this whole process, but also in illegal foreclosures that ultimately became quantitative easing to the tune of $50 fucking trillion. I mean, we could parse out what the details of all of that means, and certainly will in all of the stuff that we do. But I'm telling you, that's what it is over the 13 years. So he's got this like headline today in the in the Lever, which is his online platform. He's like, what's going on with all the housing prices? How is this possible through all of these different scenarios and everything else? And he's going to get around the periphery like he always does, like everybody does. Everybody's asking the question, what's going to happen when we have quantitative tightening? When we have quantitative tightening, we're no longer buying these, massively fraudulently created and stock buyback purchases that we've put into securities that the full faith and credit of the United States is buying. Now they're going to sell them. They're not buying them. So the whole economy is most likely going to crash, and they're going to blame it on it's not funny. They're going to blame it on Americans who have jobs. So they want to try to create more unemployment. I mean, this whole thing is sick. And so getting to the final point, or the final 2 points, because I was laughing at the beginning of this whole thing. But this guy out of Miami who's a fantastic defense attorney, his name is Bruce Jacobs. He's been fighting the good fight for a long time. I know his story inside and out. I know what he's been doing. He's been trying to protect particularly women of color who have never been laid on their mortgages that were set up by this criminal enterprise to basically steal their homes, and judges in Florida are allowing it because they don't do discovery. They don't look at what's going on. They just rubber stamp stuff because that's what they've been incentivized to do. I'm talking about they being the judges are incentivized to basically push these goddamn foreclosure cases through the pipeline, and they're getting up to set up for round 2. I just read a headline before. None other than Blackstone, the sister operation of BlackRock, has did a $50 billion capital raise because I think they're going to hoover in and buy up all of the foreclosed properties of what's coming next. That's part of it. And, this whole David Sirota thing is part of it. And so is, the hyperinflation of assets all over the country. Well, you got homeless people out on the streets and nobody can quite put two and two together. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. But so ultimately, this guy, Bruce Jacobs, has to take his knowledge in his case all the way out to Hawaii, to where he's working with the Hawaiian tribes to basically do these, combining these cases in Miami that he has, as well as these cases in Hawaii, to create this massive class action RICO against Bank of New York Mellon and also Bank of America. And gosh darn it, I do have it. Where is it? Let's see here. So basically, I just want you to consider this. So the complaint brought. They're alleging that Bank of America, as recently as July 20 of 2022, which is now, is still prosecuting fraudulent foreclosures using forged note endorsements and false mortgage assignments. Bank of America is covering it up through perjury by senior Bank of America executives, backdating of records, and destruction of evidence, all in a flagrant defiance of court orders and subpoenas, federal regulators, and the U.S. Department of Justice. The Department of Justice's $25 billion national mortgage settlement, and that was in 2012. So, again, to bring it full circle, that's the real case. I mean, yes, it's significant what Donald Trump was involved with. I'm telling you, it's a continuation of what took place in the 2008 Great Financial Crisis, and I've laid out why, my theory of what Trump's done and who he is in this whole process and everything else. And I hope it's going to be kind of an opportunity to pry open your mind to start looking at what the con reveals, so that you understand that the Department of Justice has not prosecuted these guys. So if you're a big Trump fan, you might be saying, well, why am I going to allow them to prosecute Trump if they won't take out the CEOs who did this to destroy millions of people and get away with trillions? No, I'm not like that. I'm like, Trump needs to go down, as does everybody in the apparatus, like Steve Bannon and, of course, Eric Prince and the rest of the Brady bunch. And ultimately, I want to see justice and millions of us finally come to grips with the fact that we don't have liberty and justice for all. We live in a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal syndicate where the full faith and credit of the United States is used to backstop fraud, which is what we were born in a revolution against. What do you think King George III was all about? What do you think monarchies were of Europe? What do you think aristocracies were? They stole from people and forced them to be indentured servants or slaves on their land. This is the oldest trick in the business. It's imperialism. That's all this is, through techno-feudalism. I think I've said enough. I hope you guys have a great Friday. It's nuts. I'm the only one bringing it to you. Please like and subscribe at Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs the Con on YouTube. Please spread the word that truth is marching. And please check out the con, www.thecon.tv. Have a great weekend.